Welcome to the Man Talk podcast. This is episode 35. Today, Jacob and I would like to tell some of our best stories. This isn't exhaustive, but we figured rather, that we would like to share some of the highlights that we think you'd enjoy. So, Jacob, what do you have first on the list?
So I've got a story from high school, and this is from a friend of mine who was having a hard time, and it was just a vivid scene for me. So I wanted to share it with the audience. So it was around 2009, 2010, around that time frame. I'm a senior in high school. I've got a lot of problems. It's just one of those things where you're working a lot on your school, and then I've got band, and there's all these different subcategories of work, and it just feels like your life is always just buried. And then you see somebody like the guy I'm talking about, who's just dealing with being bullied and getting shifted and blamed as a scapegoat. And then you look at that and you go, I can make time to make sure this guy gets out on the right foot and forget my problems for a minute. This matters more. So I'm in church, and we just get out of the sermon, and we're about to go to our separate ways. He's 3 years younger than me, and he's going to youth group. I'm going to my young adults group, and I get sideswiped by his parents. And his parents, in this case, this name's Dave, but that's not. That's just a cover name for his sake, because things kind of went sideways after. Um, so Dave's parents approach me and they say, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And I just go, "Yeah, sure." So we go over to the little couches that they have on the side, and we're just having this moment of like, "Hey, we're really worried about Dave. We are really worried. Do you know anything?" We hear he's getting pressured to, and they caught him with drugs, and there's all this talk about what's going on, but we don't know his story. And we're sitting around, and there's this it's just this big 3-story area, uh, and we're just kind of sitting around trying to figure out what's going on. I go, did you actually get him in the room and talk about it? Because you haven't talked about it with me yet. um, Maybe if I'm in the conversation, he'll be more willing to speak up about what's going on. So they just ding, light bulb goes on. Parents get a little bit of hope. You could tell that they're getting ready. Like they're like, yeah, no, that's the right answer. Let's get him. So I get him out of his youth group, and we start talking about what's going on. And he sits down at this metal table that we're at. It's a 4-seater, and I'm across from him, um, and we're going, hey, dude, what's going on? And he finally talks about how, yeah, no, I'm being essentially being told to be a fall guy for what's going on, at school, and but no, I don't have the drugs. That those weren't mine. I don't use. And a lot of people didn't believe him. They
So he was taking drugs.
No, he had friends that were. And the problem is when you have friends that are drug users, the problem is there's a tendency for you to match their habits eventually. At this point, he hadn't matched them. He had been rather conscientious about his choices, much to his credit. And he said, nah, I like them as people, but I don't want to have their habits, even though I do appreciate them as human beings. And he's your classic liberal of, you know what? As much as they may be flawed, I'm going to give them some respect and courtesy because I really do like them as friends. Which is interesting because a lot of people don't do that. So he actually was living like he believed as a true liberal, um,
Right.
which was encouraging. But I mean, also we could say a few other things about that. But back to the story, the guy is essentially letting us know that, like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I'm being set up. Those aren't mine. I don't know what's going on other than that, but I just need some help to make sure I get through this. And he just starts It's just an emotional moment because I mean he finally lets this out. It's been a few days of his parents trying to figure out what's going on, and then just that one extra person that he trusts that was in the conversation, now he's spilling the beans about what's going on, and it wasn't even that bad, but it was embarrassing for him. So it was just one of those like, okay, like give the guy some love. Let's make sure the guy's okay. And we walk out of there and we get in our separate cars, and before you know it, we're on our merry way after church is over. But yeah, it's just one of those moments of like we're here for you, and he felt like he didn't have to face it all alone. So it was heartwarming for me. I don't know how heartwarming it is for everyone else listening, but um,
So was it heartwarming because of your understanding and solidarity in that moment?
I liked it because here's a guy he's kind of rebellious towards his parents, but all it took was like that one extra person in his life to care. Okay, yeah, my parents, whatever, they always care. Oh wait, there's somebody else in my friend group who's actively talking to my parents to make sure I'm okay. My friends don't normally do this, so that extra reaching out to his parents and then getting them to work together, which I think was another problem. I don't know if they were working together very well at that point, but they were in that moment. And I think that really lit him up. And you could just see his face kind of, just, okay, that's off my chest. It's okay, it's out there. And the emotional burden was taken off of his shoulders. And the big lesson from that story is make sure that you take care of your friends in any way possible if they really have that kind of burden. So for me, it was as simple as being there for him and allowing him space. And sometimes it's so screwed up that's all you can do is just stand with them. But give them that space because you never know when you're going to need it too, by the way. So do it for your fellow compatriots just as much as you would, or just as they may do it for you. So it's the biblical principle of loving your neighbor as yourself. So that was it's not like the craziest story or anything. It's just one of those moments where all it took was giving the person the right conditions with the right space, and all of a sudden they feel like they can face their problems again. And he did, to his credit. He faced the problems. He went to the school administrators and told them what was going on, and he climbed out of it. And we were all really proud that, like, cool, the guy made it through freshman year without having his whole high school career ruined, and it set him up for success later through high school to continue with good grades. And that was my first mentorship activity that I really got to see kind of brighten up. But I would only hear the stories of him doing well. I didn't actually get to see it. So it was kind of like how parents are. They don't always get to
Maybe
see
you
their
can
best.
maybe you can reach out to him and see how he's doing.
So last I heard, it was a different story because, and that's another story in itself. But at least through making it through grades 9 through 12, he was doing awesome. Last I heard, though, the problem with friends like he had, if you stick around long enough and you don't have the willpower, there may be a tendency for you to nonetheless just let it happen and give in to their habits too. So
That's unfortunate to hear.
that was kind of the other double-edged sword of the story, which is, yeah, he fought it off for a while, but because he didn't have the friends later to help him get away from that,
Yeah,
he actually ended up joining them in their habits too. And that's
pretty bittersweet to hear.
it's bittersweet. So yeah, in high school we got him right, but when he got a lot of the friends that he had made that he didn't hang out with anymore that actually did take care of him and he took care of them, he started to drift. And that's just another lesson of make sure you're not letting your friends drift off.
Yeah,
Find a way to take care of them. And, and what I mean by take care of them is give them the direction they need so that way they're succeeding and they're going out there and making the world better. It's not like you're having a friend group that drags everybody down. And the warning of what happens when you don't take care of friends, or you don't take care of yourself in getting better friends. There's a joke
Yeah,
with drug addicts. Usually, you got to kick all your friends off if you kick the habit, because you're just going to fall right back in because they habitually use. So
right.
that was the story with, in this case, code name Dave, not his real name, but yeah, that one was heartwarming to me, at least in that moment.
Yeah. To continue the similar heartwarmingness, um, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about my upbringing. So, I was fortunate enough to live on a fairly decent sized property out in the countryside of Sonoma County. Now, for those who don't know, Sonoma County has a lot of wine fields or vineyards, and but before vineyards took over, the main cash crop were apples actually. So when was really young, I would see all these apple trees out in my driveway, basically, because my driveway was about uh, a 2 or 3 minute long dirt road that you have to drive up to get to the main road. And you'd see all these nice old apple trees. But sometime in the late 90s, people noticed that, hey, you can make more money planting grapes. So sometime around 96, 97, they tore out all the apple trees. Um, these specific apples were known as Gravensteins. And Gravenstein apples, they still have the parade in my hometown, Sebastopol, but there's kind of strange. They haven't really adapted. They still have the parade, but there's no more apple trees uh, anywhere. Um, but the parade itself, I didn't actually go to any of the parades, but it would be like a community get together type thing. So my neighbors went because they had llamas or whatever, and the local schools would go and all this other stuff. And um, it'd be this, or I guess it still is, even though it's just not really well established anymore, a community get together event. Um, and in times of COVID, uh, there's less and less of those because we can't meet in groups anymore. So not only was this year's Apple Blossom Parade canceled, they also canceled the only other large event my hometown had, which was the fireworks show. And communities like coming together and all this stuff doesn't really exist as much as it did in the past because now we're locked in with our technology. So what little connection you have with the community seems to be disappearing. But I can remember when I was growing up, um, just being more, things being more slow, things being more like if you want to make connections with people, you have to go out of your way and really like talk to them or hang out with them or play with them in the physical world. So especially when I was growing up, because I benefited from this more country lifestyle, I was more connected with the natural world. So I'd be going out in my yard and we'd have all these different things to play with. We've had apple trees, Gravensteins, we'd have Rome, we'd have plums, we'd have buckeyes, we'd have ferns, we'd have blackberries, all these different trees, plants, whatnot. And especially when I was young, I'd go out and explore. Um, and compared to these days, it's just very like distant. It's more electronic. It's more technological. But I can distinctly remember growing up having this explorative mindset and just kind of being at peace and calm with the yard around me and how I could manipulate it to essentially, entertain myself. Take some apples. What can you do with apples? You can eat them, or as any kid would do, you can blow them up. So I'd get like golf clubs, baseball bats, tennis rackets, and just start going to town on apple trees. I'd get the apples, throw them up, and whack them with various tools of destruction. And I don't know if you've had this experience, Jacob, but there's so much fun in blowing up uh, apples in different ways that I can't really describe it without seeing the big smile on my face pop up in the moment. Because with each different device that you're using to blow up the these pretty big apples, they all blow up in different ways, right? So with the baseball bat, they just explode out in this kind of dynamic like way, and you get this apple splatter splash back on your face, and you start laughing because it's like, oh wow, that's so cool. And then with a tennis racket, you get this grid formation. So sometimes if you hit it just the right way, it would get stuck on the racket. So you'd have, and you look at the racket, you would see the grid pattern of the tennis racket on the apple, and the apple's like lodged in there. It's pretty cool to see. And then with golf clubs, it's basically like hitting a golf ball. So basically, you would try to hit it in such a way where it wouldn't explode, but it would launch the apple as far as feasibly possible. Sometimes, if you were lucky, it'd get to the neighbor's property, and then you just have a laugh like, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." Um, yeah. So, but there's also like hardships of growing up in the country because apples can and will be thrown at you by your brothers, and they will explode on contact in various dramatic fashions. And apples are soft enough that they have that explosive capacity where it's kind of like a paintball gun, but they're not hard enough to where it leave a bruise and hurt you. So it's always fun throwing it at my brothers too, and them throwing it at me, and seeing these like explosions popping off like you're in a little war zone in your backyard. But I mentioned Buckeyes too. Buckeyes were not fun because I don't know if you know that a Buckeye is just this little thin little layer of fruit with a giant gourd seed in the middle, and that seed is extremely dense. It's basically being like a golf ball in terms of density. So imagine throwing a golf ball at someone and getting pegged with that. Really, really hurt. Did not explode. Was not fun. Just intense pain. So, anyways, it was pretty idyllic uh, growing up in the backyard with trees and all this other stuff. And um, when I go back, I usually get out a baseball bat and blow up a few apples if it's the right time of year, just to relive those memories of childhood where it's pretty fun being destructive and um, just enjoying like the fruits of your backyard.
Yeah, and the apple frag patterns.
Yeah, exactly.
We had oranges, and I think,
Oh yeah,
yeah, lots of grapefruit and oranges. Lemons, I suppose. Yeah, anything citrus we had. That's what down south is known for.
yeah,
Oh, man, great stories though. Frag patterns of apples.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I remember in a similar breath, very quickly, my brother annoyed me once. I think I was like 10, and then he was like teasing me or something, and he bolted out the door. Uh, so I just, where my front door is, we have all of our tools for cutting the yard. So I got like a tire brush that I pulled out of the front door. So I got this tire brush in my attempt to like run after my brother to try to peg him with it, right, to injure him. But he's bigger and faster, so he's like trying to outrun me. We do a whole circle around our front yard and parking area where we have our cars, and then he was about to bolt back in directly into the front door and try to lock the door to lock me out. Um, but I chucked the tire brush in such a way that it lodged. So this is like a legit 15-yard chuck. So he was 50 feet away from me, roughly. And I chucked this thing, and it spins in such a way that lodges itself between his feet, and he trips forward and falls all into the front door tools. He didn't injure himself, but it destabilized him enough to where he lost his momentum and got a little bit dazed, so that I could um, run back into the house, have a laugh with him because he didn't expect that because he literally got tripped in such a perfect throw that I was too busy laughing at his demise to care about him initially teasing me. And then he was laughing too because he was caught off guard by how that could actually work. So,
Stranger things have
always,
happened.
yeah, so I always have a tire brush by my side just in case.
At least when your brother's around.
Yeah, at least.
Wow, so different. So different than my childhood.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't recall
siblings.
throwing oranges and grapefruits around.
He probably just ate them, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think we just kind of kept them to food, but mainly I had a dog, so lots of petting and stuff.
Yeah, I also grew up on roughly 3 acres. I guess that's the house parcel size. So across, normally, if you just have a handful of, say, citrus trees, it'd be wasteful just to destroy them all. But we literally had too many apples, too many fruits on our property, so we couldn't eat them all. So we could let them just go to waste and fall on the ground and get all moldy, which is what we did. Or we could, use them to hurt each other and have fun and do what young boys do
Yeah, peg their brothers with apples.
and watch them explode off their backs. Yeah. Um,
So
what's your
random.
next story, Jacob?
My next story, I guess this is a shared one. This is the one over in 2011 where we're treading water. Remember that one?
Yeah. This is back when I didn't know how to swim, and you offered to help teach me the basics of treading water.
That's right. So we're doing summer school 2011, UC Davis. Rec pool's open because it's summertime.
Yep.
So we, who brought it up though? Was it you or me for the treading water?
To do it, to
Yeah.
practice it, me, because I need to learn.
So you asked me. We do the treading water thing, and we go for a while, and we turn it into a man talk of its own. Actually, every time we did it, um, and I think you did fine afterwards for what it's worth
Yeah.
on treading water. You went from like 15 minutes to you could go for 3 hours.
Well, the most important thing I learned initially was to not be as afraid of drowning, to incrementally step off from the ledge and just tread a little bit. The main issue wasn't so much the process of treading, it was overcoming the fear of being in the water.
Gotcha. Yeah. So my dad threw me in the water really early, and I mean that he threw me in and just sink or swim, and uh, I swam, so I was fine. And then I guess that kind of broke that apart for me pretty early, which was good. That was really good. I'd recommend it once you're once you're at a reasonable age, of course. I think he kind of he didn't take his time with that one. I think he did it the first opportunity he could. But that's getting off topic. So Julia and I are doing this treading water scene. We're probably about an hour in, and we're doing a fair amount of treading and talking about stuff. And here's this guy who is not necessarily swimming all the time, but he came up to us. Was like, "Hey, you trained for the Marines?" And we're kind of going, "What kind of question is that?" in our heads? And like, no, no, we're just treading water here, having a good time. And it's like, "Oh, all right, cool deal." And he just kind of swam off. But a lot got transactioned there. A lot was said without actually saying much. So he had the curiosity to actually say, what are these youngsters doing as far as treading water for so long? Actually asked about it. We were confused about it because we're going, no, we know what we're doing as far as why we're doing it. Julian's going to learn how to swim here a little bit more. But I didn't say that. I just said, yeah, no, we're just You're swimming. We didn't really give him a really thorough answer, but the approval he gave with the head nod of like as he swam back away into his own corner of the pool. Uh,
Carry on. Yeah.
that sense of approval was nice. I guess it just goes to show you keep doing the right thing even if people don't come up to you. But if they do, keep doing the right thing anyway. Don't think your words are going to matter too much if you say the wrong thing. Because some people are afraid of saying the wrong thing in instances like that when they meet strangers. Sometimes
Well,
just say what you need to say.
that and also take note that people are watching you and will compliment you if you're doing something they deem positive.
And they did. I mean, in this case, and even for an active place like Davis, I mean, usually you're seeing people do exercise all the time. All the time, people are going around. But in this case, it was cool to have someone delightfully surprised and to see us treading water for so long.
Yeah.
Kind of a
Yes.
short story, but
Yeah. So my next story is basically ties the thread through, well, most of my young adult life, or early life in general. So the podcast listeners probably don't know, but I wear, or I'm supposed to wear, a hearing aid in my left ear. For the last almost decade or so, I have not been. But throughout elementary, middle, and high school, I would wear my hearing aid uh, diligently whenever I was in school in order to hear the teacher and pay attention. But I didn't always wear a hearing aid, and I didn't always have hearing problems. When I was born, I was actually born with perfect hearing in both of my ears. It wasn't until I developed something called cholesteatoma on my two eardrums, both eardrums got it, that an operation needed to be performed to remove them. So, cholesteatomas are little cysts that are non cancerous that grow on your eardrums. And left unabated, the tumors or cysts, I call them tumors because they act like tumors without the cancerous property, will continue to grow into your brain basically and can make you kind of like Helen Keller. So thankfully, when I was in preschool, one of the teacher's aides noticed that I wasn't responding to her commands and recommended I went to see a hearing pathologist to double check my hearing. And this was when I was around five-ish, and they noticed these two cholesteatomas, one on each eardrum. And they're like, "Oh, well, he has to have surgery to remove these. Um, Here are the potential outcomes that can occur with the operation." So eventually, at the end of kindergarten year, over the summer, I had this operation. Um, I believe it was in July, so it was during my birthday month. So I was in the hospital for about a month to remove these two cysts because, by the nature of the operation, the ear canal, the whole ear system's about this big, about an inch, inch and a half. And to remove the cysts, you also remove the three conductive bones in your middle ear. That's the anvil, stirrup, and hammer, right? So all those had to go. Um, so, as part of the surgery, after they removed the cysts, they also had to replace the three bones that conduct your hearing into your cochlear nerves or cochlea. So, on both my ears, I have plastic um, hammer, anvil, and stirrup bones. So, plastic conductive bones. And the reason I needed to have so many operations is because during the healing process, those bones shifted in my middle ear. And the conductivity, meaning the sound transfer from the outer ear into my cochlea, uh, dampened basically. They weren't perfectly surgically in place. So, what this ended up doing was giving me a mild to moderate hearing loss in my right ear, my good ear, and then a moderate to severe hearing loss in my left ear, my bad ear, and the left ear subsequently was the ear that was the one that I had to wear my hearing aid, and pretty much defined how I interacted with people going forward. So I heal up from the operation. I'm in the room, mostly by myself at 6. My mom was bedside, making sure that I was okay. Um, but that was also my first exposure with Nintendo 64. Um, the nurse offered if I wanted to play like Crash Bandicoot, but I didn't actually know at the time what she was offering. So I said, "No, I'm good, thank you." So they had video games in the hospital. This is my first exposure to what a console system was because I'd been playing PC or watching my brothers play PC games, and I got to play, or I was offered one of the best, you know, Nintendo 64 games at the time, Crash Bandicoot, and I was just like, no, thank you. I'd rather watch TV. Which is kind of opposite of what a kid you would expect a kid to do, but um, that just touched more on my lack of exposure to what was offered uh, in the outside world from my upbringing. So, from what I remember of the operation, there was a lot of dazed and confused, like lack of and bandages all around my head because it was invasive surgery and they had to remove the cysts and then wait for my surgery to heal. And subsequently, they determined, oh, he has a hearing loss in his left ear. Do you want to continue with another surgery, a seventh surgery, to rectify that? And my parents were like, no, he's gone through enough. Maybe in the future, if he wants to fix it, he can have an operation to fix it. But after 6 surgeries, I think it's time he just heal up and not go through this ordeal anymore. So that's how developed my hearing loss. It wasn't because of any born at birth issue. It's because of this condition that developed when I was older, when I was 5 or 6, and then the subsequent surgery that shifted the conductive hearing in my middle ear. Um, and then subsequently throughout the years, I would have various AM/FM transmitters that would amplify the audio until I'd get eventually a hearing aid in my left ear. And I'll hold off on telling the hearing aid stories um, for now because they get pretty involved as well. But for my early upbringing, that's how I became hearing impaired.
I think that's the first time I actually got the whole story that you've said since I've known you 10 years ago.
Yeah, I don't really talk about it much, and I don't really wear my hearing aid much anymore. I've thought about wearing it again to try to just balance out my hearing, but there's a lot of inconveniences that come with it. So, can't wear headphones, right? Uh, Newer hearing aids have Bluetooth technology, so you can have personalized Bluetooth hearing aids if you want. But I don't have those. I have my hearing aid from the early 2000s, which is early 2000s tech. And I was looking at, and hearing aids, believe it or not, are not covered usually by medical insurance. So you have to, each hearing aid, the good kind, can cost upwards of $3,000. Right. So if you do something to your hearing aid and it's not insured for whatever reason, you have to spend roughly $3,000 to get a replacement. And then the vast majority of people I interact with don't even notice that I have any hearing impairment because I've adapted so well to just being able to communicate with inference and guessing when someone's mumbling or saying something I'm not totally clear on what they're saying. Um, and no one notices really, and I get the gist of what they're saying, so come to the point where I've adapted, and other people haven't really noticed. And to be honest, they don't on a day-to-day basis. They don't notice. They don't bring it up. They don't mention it. They don't point it out. And that's largely in part, or that's largely due to the fact that I don't mention it, I don't notice it, and I don't bring it up. It's kind of interesting how that works, right? If you have a problem, people are more likely to point out that problem if you point out that problem all the time. Or if you hold your cards close to your chest and you don't mention it, it's almost as if the problem doesn't exist. It's kind of interesting.
Something to think about for later for sure.
Yeah. So, what other story do you have in mind?
So I've told this one in other mentorship podcasts, but this one I think deserves one more full overlook to what happened to one of my mentees named Alex. So she was a mentee of mine that started in 2012 over in the chemical engineering program as a freshman. And we were getting her incorporated into UC Davis. That's the whole point. Get her incorporated into the chemical engineering program, spend some time at lunch at the DC every now and again. And, I was hearing some of the same complaints that a lot of freshmen have when they're first getting started. I don't know where to find people, or I'm having a tough time being away from home. The classes are not what I'm used to from high school. Yeah, because everything's changed. So they're going to tell you things have changed. So those are normal, cool. They're observing that their new environment isn't where they were before. This is totally different. So you expect to hear that. And I'm a junior at this point, so I'm going, yeah, I had some similar observations. Yep, you're thinking properly. But I noticed as the months went on, fall quarter, winter quarter, they kept being said. So usually by winter quarter, you've gotten some foundation of, okay, I've at least got some kind of a study group, some kind of a friend group. My dorm mates I'm starting to figure out and have some time with. Some of that's starting to happen. Well, in her case, it wasn't happening very well, and the growth was pretty stunted in terms of getting integrated with college life.
Acclimated.
Yeah, and getting within her classes, she's still feeling pretty isolated. And I noticed that, and I go, okay, we're starting to see a change here, but it's not very much, and it's impacting her grades wise. There's some things going on now where she is having a harder time studying. She's getting, she feels like she can't go to office hours sometimes because she doesn't want to bother people either. So there's that sense of, okay, not taking advantage of all the opportunities that are around, but also feeling like everything is on her shoulders and she's not able to bear it. And eventually spring quarter comes around and I get a little glimpse of, yeah, she needs some help. Like she needs some, okay, I'm going to put more time in. So over the few weeks before the story that I'm going to tell you happened, we started putting a little more time in on lunches and seeing where she's at. And yeah, you could definitely tell she appreciated those interactions to keep her sane. But one day, I'm in the library and I'm working on something for heat transfer, mass transfer. It's at the last quarter of junior year, so we've got to get a lot of our transfer classes out of the way. So all these are the crazy hard chemical engineering theoretical classes, and I hear someone sobbing in the distance, but I'm still trying to work, but after a few seconds of that, you kind of go, okay, wait, it's getting louder. I'm in one of those one-seater desks, remember, that don't have any shielding. So
Yeah.
you can't really, it's designed so you don't see people. So I don't see anybody, um, but I keep listening, and the sobs getting a little more audible, and I go, "Who is that?" And sure enough, it's Alex, and she's about 3 or 4 of those open desk tables away, and she was having a bad time, like just bad time, and it got kind of worse because once she actually saw someone she knew that saw her like that,
Oh no.
well, right, because now it's like, oh, for real, yeah, I'm not just crying, I'm crying because it's all bad. So she's just having a it went from this gentle sob to an increase to this bawling her eyes out. And I was just like, hey, what's up, man? Alex, you okay? And she's going like, no, I'm not okay. Um, I'm having some personal issues right now. Um, my personal life feels like it's a wreck. I can't. I feel like I can't get my studying done. She's saying a lot of stuff, and she probably said a lot more than that during the story. But I go, look, regardless of your problems, there's no way you're going to study like this. No, and there's no way. You can't even pick up your pen right now. You're going to really read like this? No way. Let's get you home. So we're going to pack up her stuff, and I pack up mine because I still have my stuff out. And we're in the second floor building, just trying to get it all off of these wooden tables. And she's got her pack on, and okay, so did you bike? Did you walk? Did you bus? Oh, I bus. Okay. So I unlock my bike and I start walking with her to the bus stop over the MU because that's where she needs to go in order to get on the bus. And we're still trying to get past the gentle sob. There's still some tears going, and for me, I'm a wreck too now at this point. I'm not crying, but inside. I'm going, whoa, like this. People are way more vulnerable than I thought, particularly Alex, and just trying to like, hey, we're gonna get through this. Let's get you to the bus, one step at a time. And I'm almost saying this to myself too, so I don't just flat out start sobbing too, because it was just a really sad sight to see her like that. And it was just, be gentle, be easy, take it slow on the walk towards the bus. Let's just get to the bus station.
Yeah.
So we get to the bus station, and I put my bike on, and we get ready to go, and we're going to her stop, and she gets off, and she says thanks, and I get off on mine. Mind you, this is my 21st birthday, so I'm getting phone calls left and right about like, hey, where are you at? Are you gonna go out and party or something? I'm getting troll texts from my uncle and voicemails from my family. And so all this is happening. I lock up my bike and I go upstairs and I see there's a Bible study going on in the second floor. And then they say the same thing, like, aren't you supposed to be somewhere? Kind of implying that enjoy your 21st birthday. And it's like, nah, I'm going to bed. So,
Oh, wow.
so I went to bed, and because I was pretty done by that point too. I answered phone calls on the way back to the apartment, so it was pretty early, but I went to bed, and so all this ended up being like, okay, that was a crazy day, but the epilogue was, we got her home, and she sends me this wonderful card that I keep. And I kept this everywhere because this is like one of those burning hopes of mentorship that I've got living proof of in this card. And it's talking about, thank you for being there for me. Thank you for being a friend when I didn't have one, and getting someone to drive me, really underlined, early in the morning. And I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you. I'm gonna get my life straight. So she drops out of school, and she says, I'm going to drop out of UCD. I go, what? And like, no, I need to go back to community college. I need to dial down. So she does, but she gave me this wonderful card at the end of the epilogue conversation. And that was the inspiring hope that I got for doing mentorship right in 2013. So at that point, I learned a few lessons, some of which we covered. People are vulnerable and they need help. Don't think people are too strong to not ask for help. find a way to help others because you have no idea what troubles they're dealing with. They're just not telling you. And if you're in mentorship, keep doing it. That's one of the best things I've been able to find for getting people on the right track. It's just having somebody else walk with them a little bit, get them straight, and then be on their merry way. Alex was an inspiration for the mentorship family that we did in the chemical engineering department that next year, and it impacted dozens of students. And thanks to that lesson, it made tens of mentors later. So I gotta say, for what it's worth, you never know how one story like that can make an impact on so many people.
Yeah, mentorship in general is pretty important, or just aligning yourself with a teacher of some sort to try to help you navigate your way through tough obstacles or experiences. I mean, wisdom, right, isn't so much book smart, but practical lived experience. And to ignore wisdom of like those older than you or who just have gone through the gauntlet and have the tips and tricks to help you get through it as well. To ignore that is really isolating, and I don't recommend it. Try to learn from other people's experiences. It will help you out immensely.
Helped her out.
And yeah, and be willing to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah. So that story for me kind of hits home because it's it was the proof of concept of don't ever think mentorship's not important. Don't ever think that okay, that's just going to be another priority. It's nah, that not even a bit. People need it way more than they think. So if you're in it, keep doing it because the impact that it had just for one person, I would have never guessed that's how the mentorship story was going to end for UC Davis for me. So I'm even glad we even had a chance to talk about it in as the extended version on podcast 35 that we're doing right now. So, Julian,
Yeah,
if you've got any other stories, I want to hear them because I know that one went a little long.
no, no worries. Um, yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about um, my freshman year of college. So, for lack of a better term, my freshman year was pretty rough because it was a big transition from how things were happening in high school. Just to paint the picture a bit, for me in high school, I was essentially top 10% of my class. Got my name on like the wall, sort of thing. But I would argue that that didn't necessarily prepare me properly for the trials and tribulations of college because I was always under the working assumption that if I just showed a little bit of effort, that'd be good enough to, uh, navigate my way through classes because no one else was trying. But when I got to Davis, that was a role reversal. People actually cared about education, cared about succeeding, cared about getting good grades. And imagine my shock coming to Davis to see that there's a competitive nature, a competitive spirit in everybody that I didn't witness in high school, which is the bare minimum got you ahead. So imagine my shock freshman, sophomore year trying to essentially collaborate slash compete with my peers for decent grades as opposed to just do the bare minimum effort. I had to fundamentally retrain my perspective on work and what the meaning of, effort was because the bare minimum wouldn't cut it anymore. You actually have to try or risk, you know, getting kicked out for lack of effort. Now, we had a few different cases of people who lived with us that had various degrees of effort placed into their work. So I found some solidarity with them, saying like, "Oh yeah, they're also not trying, so it should be okay, right?" Wrong. They're not trying had what made me later realize was like, yeah, that's what's gonna happen if you don't get your act together. So we had two housemates who both, me and Jacob, who we both knew, who in my sophomore year had to drop out of UC Davis. And that was also simultaneously around the time where I realized, hey, I need to like get my act together and put in more effort, or I'm going to be like my housemates. So the second one wasn't as severe as the first one, so I'll start with him. With the second one, he still has a nihilistic tendency and still is overly cautious with how he interprets the world or acts in the world. He does not chase his dreams. He does the bare minimum effort that he has to do. And the result of this is that although he's a fairly intelligent person, he does not try nearly as much as he has to, and he probably had the same upbringing I did, where he was one of the smartest people in his classes, coming from Oakland, so he didn't have to necessarily put in a lot of effort. And anything that required effort, he would not try because it should just come to him naturally, right? So originally he was a chemical engineering major, but that proved too tough for him because he actually had to compete against all these other smart people as well. And that threw him for a loop because he was too fixated on just trying to be happy and had all these other problems going on internally with his own personal life, like with nihilism or just trying to find any joy in what he's doing. So by his sophomore year, he, I guess, was checked out to the point where he had to drop out of college and go back to community college. And that's what he did. He went back for about a year. He got his grades up. More importantly, he changed his major to something that he actually enjoyed. And then he went back to Davis the subsequent years and got his degree. So the lesson for him was that he probably shouldn't have been doing something he wasn't passionate about, let alone where he had to try a lot harder than the effort that he was willing to put in. Uh, for the first example, the worst, arguably worst example of someone I knew for at Davis was my other housemate, who I'm not sure what his high school upbringing was like or middle school upbringing, but based off of the descriptions I do know, they're probably pretty isolating. He just kept to himself and played video games all the time. And he had some really bad anxiety and just general interaction, lack of interaction with people to the point where his shyness really impaired his ability to ask for help. He just lacked that ability to reach out for help and try to have people explain the work to him. So there could have been a little bit of pride issue there, but I think it was just more fear of looking weak and fear of, not performing. So with this housemate, um, this was the last few months that we were at our apartment in sophomore year. It was the summer of sophomore year. And there was an episode where he was taking a specific course for the third time. Now, he was a mechanical engineer, and in engineering, if you fail one of the fundamental courses more than 3 times, you're basically kicked out of the major. So he had failed it twice already. He had to petition to take it a third time, and this is his third go around. So I was watching him. I believe he was living in the living room at the moment. And I just see him come in, stoic faced, kind of looked possessed after he got his final quiz back. Not final quiz, but one of the last quizzes that would determine whether he'd passed the class. And he bombed that quiz. He was not passing that class. And the realization swept over him that he was going to get kicked out. So he's shell shocked I'm watching this, and he starts to get, for lack of a better term, demonic um, with his expression. So he's completely detached from his normal self and started getting into this mode, trying to utilize or trying to get into this cognitive dissonance to where it made sense that everything was going to work out, even though it wasn't. It wasn't going to work out. He was going to suffer the consequences of not passing that class. So what happens is he very calmly gets one of these empty bottles. Um, we had like, I think it was an empty bottle of Sky vodka because we had like a party. Um, Not him, but the apartment had a party a few nights before. So he took this bottle, and we don't know what he's doing with it. So it's me and a couple other people watching him, and we're like, "Hey, hey, what's going on?" Right? And then he's just ignoring us, and then he just whacks the countertop and makes a dent in the countertop with the bottle. I think he thought the bottle was gonna shatter, and then he would have like a brandishing thing, but he wasn't strong enough, or the bottle was not weak enough to shatter. So then we see that he damaged the countertop, which we would all have to pay for. Um, we didn't. He paid for it all at the end of the year, but still, he damaged the countertop. One of our housemates take the bottle away from him so he doesn't keep damaging the house, and then he just leaves. And we're all like talking amongst each other. And it's like, should we go after him? And we come to the conclusion, no, he'll be back. We'll just let him walk it off. So a few hours pass. It's about twilight outside, so the sun's almost about to set. Um, he walks back in the house with the biggest smile on his face that we've ever seen. Truly looked possessed. We ask him, "Hey, are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm good." And he's like waddling back and forth into the house, and is like, "Are you sure?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna have to drop out and go back home, and yeah, I got scared outside, so I came back." Like, scared of what? Where'd you go? Oh, I was walking down this trail, and I came across this giant spider web, and the spider was really big and scared me. So I decided to turn around and come back home. And we're all like staring at each other because he was telling each of us, we were all there concerned, like in the living room, and he comes back with this possessed smile. It was like a giant spider. It's like, yeah, it's really scary. So it was starting to get dark, and that also scared me. So I came back, and we're like, oh, okay. So he goes to his room, puts his headphones on, and proceeds the game as if nothing had just happened in the last 4 hours. And after that, we all were concerned, but we couldn't do anything because he failed out. So it was just a matter of time before he had to leave and drop out of Davis. And that's what happened. He dropped out, and subsequently speaking with him, I learned that he kept trying to come back from community college and do mechanical engineering, but he still went past those courses because he lacked I guess, the due diligence either to get help or to try to overcome whatever obstacle he was having with mechanics of materials, which was the class he wasn't passing. So, or maybe it was fluid dynamics. Yeah, it's fluid dynamics. So, for mechanical engineers, fluid dynamics is pretty important. You need that for thermal fluid dynamics. So, without that, you can't even do the major. So, and he specifically wanted to be an aerospace. engineer, so he definitely needed, well, fluid thermodynamics, which if you can't do the first part, definitely can't do the combination of the two. So, needless to say, or I'll say it, um, he was not able to pursue his engineering career. He tried going into the military, but he didn't pass the physical fitness requirements. Um, and I don't know what he's up to, but I do know he still games, and that is still a aspect of his life. Um, but short of that, I think he got discharged from the military for not being able to pass the physical requirements, and he's just existing. So, not a very great outcome in his circumstance. At least with the other guy I mentioned, he's doing fine. He's making money. He's living at home with his folks, saving all the. He's doing, relatively speaking, just okay. But with the other guy, I don't think he's doing that great.
Don't be like guy number two. That's the. I mean, come on. And people make fun of the military, by the way. Oh, anyone can go in. Actually, that may have been true in the 1970s when people actually took care of themselves on the regular, because there wasn't anything to do. Like TV, you were lame if you watched TV as like a regular 8 hour day thing. Nah, maybe an hour or two, because there's only like a few channels to choose from that you have
Or like
access to.
4 channels, sure.
Right. So you're gonna go out and play baseball, or you're gonna go for a run. You're gonna do stuff outside, because that's where more options were. But yeah, don't end up like guy number two. With guy number one, at least he's got a shot at trying to turn something around, because with a steady stream of income, housing, you can at least start figuring out things and starting to become independent. But
Yeah, I mean, in his circumstance, he's in a rent-controlled house in the city, so all of his folks work, including him, so they can just accumulate wealth and savings where other people might not may not have necessarily have the opportunity, which is great, um, in his circumstance, because if he wants to buy a house or use his wealth that he's accumulating slowly but surely, he has plenty of options to do so. Whereas in the second case, the guy doesn't have any opportunity that he's able to build up, so he can only climb so far out of the his situation, unlike the first guy, who was able to turn it around in some capacity.
yeah, lots of
The,
lessons learned from that roommate of ours.
yep. Do you have a final story to share, Jacob?
I do. This one. So I thought Davis was going to be some of my highlighted emotional points. Um, Turns out that I was proved out to be very wrong. Um, and I went on a crazy oil adventure for about a year, and it ended. Well, it was, or near the end, it had a climax of a 2 month operational school, and it wasn't just in the United States. It was in,
Before you tell the just the climax person or portion, can you provide a lead up to why it was so climactic?
sure, yeah. So I get a job in the oil field in July of 2014 and start. I got the offer 6 months earlier, which was a big win. I'm going, no way. I get to have an offer before I get to be graduated. You can't underestimate that feeling, because
You must
so
have been
many
very
people
proud
don't
of
get that.
yourself. You must have been proud of yourself.
And now that's done. You know where you're going. So now everything you're doing in school is directly impacting, okay, finish, 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 finish. There's something for you at the end. You've got a life after. You can start building wealth. You can start getting your experience and getting your resume built. You can do it now. It's an option. It's not a dream anymore. It's real. So Mind's blown. Boom. So I'm going right to it. So I go up to Williston, North Dakota. I do a few months there, and over those few months, I got to meet a fair amount of people in the oil field. One of which, named Margo, we were working together off and on again for a few months. So whether it be on different oil jobs or working in the lab, getting ready for modules, sometimes hanging out after if we had time, but usually we were on opposite schedules, so we didn't see each other that much in that context. But there was a big lead up from all these different jobs, and there was a mini story of, I remember Margo worked a 16-hour day, and she was
Wow.
supposed to go on days off. And our senior actually said, "No, you're actually coming in tomorrow. We're gonna need you until this job's done." And her jaw just went boom, all the way down. Like, what? I just worked 11 days. I'm supposed to be
Wow.
on days off. No, you're coming in. We need you till the end of the well. We need someone to run the lab equipment. This is for one of our high priority clients. We can't afford to have you guys take a break. You guys need to finish this. And I remember her face, just like her countenance fell, just like, no way. And she was, in the back of her mind, she's just pissed beyond all repair. And then she's, but her face is just walking
Sounds
out.
pretty sounds pretty stressful.
Yeah. So I'm like, hey, how you doing, Margo? And just like, don't. And because I heard the conversation, and I was just like, hey, you all right? She's like, nah, ask me later. I go, fair enough. So we got through moments like that a few different times, and we found out in February of 2015 that we were scheduled. We were going to go into this operations school together, and we go, oh, we got the ticket. We're going, and turns out we're both going at the same time. So I'm going, okay, this is interesting. Let's see how this goes. So we go across the country, fly from Williston to Minneapolis, over to Chicago, running, trying to make our gates, and then we finally get on the flight from Chicago to the United Arab Emirates, which is an incredibly long flight. And we get there and we meet a few other engineering staff. They're going to be within this training program. So the operations school normally has a class of 12 people per class, so it's pretty exclusive in respect of, okay, you're getting some serious training if you're only getting 12 people per class. For a company that big, you're talking probably 180,000 employees by this point. So
Sounds very specialized.
it's pretty specialized, and it's for only for well services. So we were pretty excited that, okay, we're doing this. We're away from the field for a while. We get to actually find out what our job is. There's a lot of expectation of the job's going to get better once we go through this program because they're actually going to give us the tools we need.
Yep.
Well, that was sort of true, but things went rocky pretty quick. So first day, 2 people out of the 12 get held back. They're both from the United States. They both stay back. So we're automatically down from 12 to 10 people first day. And so we're getting to know who's there. Some people are from South Africa. Other people are from the United States. There are about 4 or 5 of us from the United States. Another person from Saudi Arabia. Another from Indonesia. We had a lot of people from around the world. So it was pretty cool to meet everybody. We all spoke English. But we were all there for one purpose. Okay, we've got day one. We got to make sure we're getting ready to know all of our oil field jargon, know what the pump rates are, know the pieces of equipment, pieces of kit that go with each piece of pump or mixer or whatever. So Margo and I,
Sure.
we were pretty confident.
Sounds like a lot of pressure.
You have no idea. That pressure was because they've been instilling that pressure into us about op school since we got the job. That's going to be the point where you either have a career that continues, or you have a more like what happened to person number 2 in your last story, where, okay, you're not really going anywhere. This company got 6 months to leave, or maybe you even leave on the spot, like what was happening when we got there.
Yep.
So when we got there, we found out that oil wasn't doing that great in the last couple months, but during our second week, we find out Margo gets a text message from someone in Williston going, "Whoa, man! They just laid off a quarter of the personnel at our staff, and that's an 800-person area.
Wow.
So 200 people let go. Okay, so 200 people were let go, and we're getting ready for this next test of ours that we're doing. I failed the first one, by the way, the first written exam by 2%. I was livid because I go nuts. I only have one chance every single time that I do this op school. Otherwise, I fail because you only get one fail. Every other time you have to pass. Otherwise, you get kicked out of school.
So you failed the very first chance. So there's no room for subsequent failures.
Exactly. So day one I did fine, but that wasn't that was more of a gimme. Even though there was a lot of pressure for it, but we prepped so much for that first day, we had it right. The next test, which was that Friday, I failed it by 2%. You have to get 75% or above in order to do it right.
And you got 73.
I got 73. I get a talk to by the professor because any failure is deemedly not necessarily criticized, but documented, letting you know, hey, you only get one more chance. You need to make sure you don't screw up anymore. What plan of attack are you going to do to make sure you do well on the next one? And you have that whole written statement with them, and you sign at the bottom, and you kind of feel like a criminal almost. Like, whoa, man, like this is some heavy stuff. So I get my act together a little more, I guess, after I've gotten used to Abu Dhabi another few days. And now we're doing a different test, and we find out two of these kids in our class, or young adults in this case, get pulled out mid-exam. So we're doing our exam. There's something high priority enough that they're being pulled away from their exam immediately. So we finish the exam. We find out those two were being told that they're going to get let go.
What?
Right. Mid-exam, week 2 of an 8-week course. 2 of the 10 that were around got pulled out to be let go to go back to their original countries that they were working in, to be let go.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going like, no way. What is going on? We're already down a third of our people in the first 2 weeks. And I'm not looking too good right now. So there's a real impending sense of doom.
Right.
So a wide variety of other problems happened during that next few weeks, where we've got people getting through the exams, we're making it through the design, and we're getting over the humps. We're doing outdoor demonstration of what it's like to be a pump operator, a valve operator, the supervisor, and the line boss. Everyone gets to do it. So we're rotating, we're doing frac jobs, we're doing all this stuff. Finally, by week 8, you could tell people are getting really sick of it. But the problem is that the final broke 2 more people. So
Like, they failed?
They failed, and then, sure enough, they get pulled into a room with 3 of the executive people of the school, let them know they're going to go forfeit their student visa they have overseas, because you only have 24 hours once it's revoked to get the heck out of the country, which in its own right is extremely stressful. You have no support for being in that country the minute that student visa is taken away.
Wow.
So 2 of them just start bawling because these 2 ladies get, and mind you, they're about our age at the time. We're all around like mid-20s, early 20s. Yeah. And this is week 8.
This sounds like Survivor more than a training.
No joke. One of the gals that got fired that instant called it the Hunger Games. So, and that was, when she deemed that in week 3. So week 3, she calls it the Hunger Games. So we kind of knew this was going to be like that.
Yeah.
So we get up to this point or we've done our demonstrations, we're doing our final exam, we're getting ready for a final presentation, and now we're down from 8 people to 6. So now we originally had 4 teams of 2, or 2 teams of 4, now we have 2 teams of 3. So now that we got 2 teams of 3, we got to get our final design ready, and now we've got a 30-minute presentation and 60 minutes of Q&A on anything in the entire class. Anything. And there's, it's again, you got 3 or 4 people that are criticizing your work, testing you on the spot, and you can't do anything when your fellow compatriot that is your presenter buddy, they have to defend themselves. And if they don't, then they lose the question. And if you speak up, they also lose the question.
Wow.
Pretty hard to watch, man, because there was one guy who I still talk to from time to time, every few months. He was being very polite, and he was trying to tell them the right answers, but he was taking them a little more time, but they were rushing him. And they were doing that because they were trying to see his professional behavior collapse. That's what they want.
Yeah,
so
their sole purpose is to drill you, to invoke a failure, and all you can do is not let that happen.
So all you can do as someone waiting for your question, because they're doing this for an hour. You question, you question, you question. And you're just sitting there, or standing there in this case, and you're just trying to maintain composure, because that's just, no group presentation would be like this. Usually if someone had the answers, they'd chime in and say, look, I worked on that part of the project, I can tell you, just ask me. My buddy over here, he would be more than happy to ask you about this other key section of the project.
Yeah.
Well, we made it through, but Margo's team, that's a different story. So our first team, we went in, and they're waiting the whole time, because everyone was ready at 10 o'clock. They waited the entire 90 minutes getting ready, and then they saw us come out, and they're like, that was long. What? And I go, yeah, get ready, gear up. And then they hop right in, they close the door, and then they do their presentation and Q&A. And we just sit on I remember sitting on the couches. There were these quasi-leather couches, kind of like what I'm sitting on now. And I remember just kind of laying down, because we were really tired, and I remember my hands getting just so, like, ice cold. Because you're tired, you're frustrated, you just want to break. And I felt an actual sense of fear come over me from that presentation afterward. And so we finally got through the work, though, and they had a congratulations early, like you made it through the whole school. Yeah, it's like a reception. And so they're paying for this all-you-can-eat place downtown. It's like this hotel that's got this bomb, like 25-meter pool, and it's got this.
I'm assuming it's very opulent.
Yeah, it's about, like, several stories high, and we're going there at night, and they booked the place out for this little section of ours, and
wow.
we were pretty happy about being there at that point, but we kind of didn't know the results yet. So we don't know the results yet, man. So why should we be celebrating?
Yeah.
So everyone's we have mixed reviews about why we're there. We're enjoying it, but we're inside. You can tell that everyone's got this butterflies. I don't know what this is yet. So we're eating, and Margo reaches over to me and says, hey, Jake, can you stay behind? I know they've got a bus, but we can get a cab later. Can you stay behind? And I go, well, what? I'm kind of playing dumb. I'm like, what for? I kind of just want to go home and sleep. And she's like, no, I want you to stay here. And she kind of does the, like, eyes locked, serious talk, kind of gives me the nod, like, you should stay. And I go, okay, I'll stay. I'm fine. So, and she leans over to Nick, another friend of ours, and goes, hey, Nick, can you stay? And then he's like, no, I'm not staying. And then she was already up to here with me, but she like, Jake, you're staying, right? Because she wanted to make sure that, okay, just
Someone will say, yeah.
yeah, even though I already said like, yeah, I don't mind. She leaned back over and, are you coming? And I'm like, yeah, look, I'm coming. I promise. Don't worry. I'm not just following Nick. So everybody leaves and they go on the bus and they're going back to they're going back to our compound training sector, and Margo and I stay behind. So we walk up the doors and then there's this giant beach, and you're seeing this overlook to the Persian Gulf, which is where the UAE is, and it's nighttime, and the stars are shining in the right way such that the reflection of the light is making the Gulf, it gets dark and it gets light and it gets dark and it gets light with the current. So you're really seeing quite the spectacular scene there on this beach. And Margo orders some hookah, which is like this, coal fired, and you breathe in the smoke and then you breathe it out, and really popular over there. And I go, okay, whatever. So she's got her set up there, and we're just sitting on the beach together in these chairs. And she's kind of got that dead stare for a while because she's just trying to decompress.
Staring off into the Persian Gulf.
Yeah, staring off into the Persian Gulf. And she leans over, finally, after this long silence. And I'm just kind of trying to chill, too. And she leans over and she says, Jake, can you name one person for the company we work for that is actually happy at their job? Can you name one? So I gave a minute, and I thought it over, and I thought about all my bosses and coworkers that were doing stuff, and if she meant engineering, and I go, fine. So I'm thinking about engineering staff, and I leant over a few seconds later, and I go, you know what? I can't really think of anybody that comes to mind. I can only think of one person who's a workaholic that can tolerate it, but it doesn't bother her very much. And I told her that example, which was my mentor figure I had over there that I got assigned, because they actually had a mentorship program system.
Yeah.
And Margo looks back at the ocean, then looks back at me, looks back at the Persian Gulf, looks back at me, and says, yeah, Jake, I think I need to get a new job. We can't stay here. And she says we, because I think we kind of had the same eye contact as we looked back and forth, and then I'm like, yeah, we need to get a new job. So that was the deciding moment where we both said, okay, when we get back, we got to find a way out. It's time to leave. Turns out that next day, and there was more obviously explained during that hour or so that we were on the beach. Margo alluded that we were going to have 2 more people that were going to get cut from our class, and sure enough, it was 2 more people. So now we're down to 4. So, and they took them to that same banquet.
Wow.
So they let them go. They let them go to that banquet to make them feel like they did something. But at the same time, the next morning, they cut them off. They didn't have an email. They said, yep, you guys are, you didn't pass the course. You didn't pass this whole thing. And then they didn't get their signed operations school letter from the instructors, and they were told to leave the same day we did, everyone else that passed. So 4 out of 12 people passed this crazy operations school. And I remember them walking by at mine. I was so paranoid. I'm like, no, you signed this, because he was about ready to walk and give the next person the certificate. And I go, nah, sign it. I was very adamant to make sure that this is over, right? Once they sign that piece of paper, this is over.
Yeah.
We had a debrief interview after, and I asked this instructor of mine, so, yeah, what the heck happened back there? Because once you're in the debrief, you can actually talk to them like an individual. So now that I'm talking like an individual, I go, so, what was that? Like, that whole process. Can you explain to me why it had to be that way. And he goes, well, they didn't pass. I mean, they didn't do a very good job. It didn't do a very good job, period. So my next question was, okay, with all that put on the table, explain to me why the heck you were pressuring me so much during this. Individually. Like me. You called me out throughout a lot of this where other people weren't getting called out. Why? And he said, because you, when I was able to push you, you did perform better and you overcame more stuff than your other class compatriots. And when I heard that, I got kind of disgusted because I'm like, that's it? Like, you did it because, oh, you could get more out of me, so that way it makes me a higher performer. And that's when I'm going, yeah, got it. I'm a machine. The more buttons they can push, so the further I can climb. They like that because then the manager looks like he's doing his job by making people work harder out of fear.
Yeah.
So after the debrief interview, Margo and I get on the plane. She's going to Turkey. I'm going to Davis, and we both take our long flights home. And it was that PTSD kind of thing that happened over there. I kind of get a glimpse of what people in our military get when they fly home after a deployment, and
Right.
they don't feel like they're really home because it happens so darn fast. I kind of understand what that's like now. Now, I don't understand what their whole life is, and I do respect it, but when I got back to Davis, I still didn't feel safe. And I didn't feel safe for a while. It took a few months to really get over it and feel like I was on level ground again. But that key story of Margo and I on the beach was that critical inflection point in, yeah, we got to find something else before we get as miserable as everybody else is here. So that was quite a long story, and I probably could have explained more details about what happened during that campaign over there for 2 months, and maybe we will in future podcasts, but that was the overview of getting through my first job. So what do you think, Julian?
I always think that's one of your best stories to tell whenever you tell it. So thank you for sharing it again, even if it does give you a glimmer of PTSD.
Just a glimmer. Fortunately, there's enough time span now where it does. I used to tell it, and it would get me elevated in like heart rate, but now it's
worked up, I imagine, physiologically.
Yeah. I had. There's plenty of other stories to tell with that, which we should do if you're interested. But at least that beach story, I'll never forget that because it was timeless. That looking at the Persian Gulf, looking over to see my friend here that I've been working side by side with for so long, just lose that last bit of hope that what we're working for isn't working. And then, okay, we gotta go. All right. And that was good. That was a good cathartic moment to know that we had to leave.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point to leave off on. So, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Man Talk podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed our stories, and if not, then we'll try to tell better stories next time. But personally, I really enjoy each of these stories, listening to them or telling them. So hopefully you did as well.
You bet. We'll put descriptions in the bottom so that way you can see all the different timestamps delineated, and it'll be good. So that way, if you didn't like one particular story, you can just scroll through and be like, oh, let's try out that one. For your convenience, we prefer that too, so that way we don't have to listen to the whole thing. Maybe we're only looking for one little glimmer of what we did in the podcast, so we're doing the same for our audience. So thanks again for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.